Seasonality is basically the tendency of certain currencies, certain markets, certain assets to perform in certain ways at specific times of the year. Now, why is this important? Well, let's take for instance the S&P 500. Now here you can see a seasonal chart showing the average price swings of the S&P 500 over the past 10 years. In other words, to make it simple, think of this as an average line of the past 10 years, 10 yearly charts, combined from January to December. Think about those charts combined into one. So those 10 charts get averaged up into just one line, and that's a seasonal chart. So it's a visual representation of how in this case, the S&P 500 tends to behave throughout the year. It's natural rhythm, if you will, okay? So how price fluctuates between the year based on the past 10 years worth of data. Okay, it's a little complex, I get it, but here's where it gets really interesting, because notice these distinct periods during the year where price tends to move higher or tends to move lower. Now, this is where seasonality gets really useful, because we can identify on a seasonal chart the regular flows that happen through the year. For instance, let's take this time frame between late June and early July. There's clearly, as you can see, an evident bullish flow, a bullish move happening in that time range. So I spot this on the chart, and from this I dive deeper to see exactly year after year over the past 10 years, 15 years, whatever, how the S&P 500 performed between late June and early July in this case, for every single year. That gives me a much more detailed insight into the seasonal pattern to see actually if there's really something there or not. So, as you can clearly see, this is where seasonality gets extremely interesting and useful. Because, come on, look at this. The S&P 500 for the past 15 years has been consistently up every single year between June 27 and July 24. Now, is it just a coincidence? Could be, of course, but it doesn't matter. The pattern is there. Traders and investors know it. We know it. And so it's something that the market cares about. It's something statistically relevant that you can use in our advantage. So knowing this seasonal flow is literally a strategic advantage for your trading. And you can imagine why. Like, what do you think would be the wisest trade to ever running in July on the S&P 500? Longs, of course. And when I speak about something, it's because we trade it. We put it into action. This is not just theory. We traded the S&P 500 exactly on this pattern on our public Telegram channel. Now, seasonality obviously wasn't the only variable here, okay? We also had the fundamental context in favor of further upside, okay. But still, seasonality in this case was the biggest factor giving us an upside bias for the month of July on the S&P 500. And here's how the trade unfolded. Literally, imagine knowing what to trade, when to trade, and in which direction to trade it. That's seasonality. Now, does it always work? No, of course not. Seasonal patterns work until they don't. But in the meantime, they give you a strategic advantage. Now, here's another example. This is a recurring seasonal flow that happens on EURGBP in early August. It's quite consistent. It's not as consistent as the previous example on the S&P 500, but still, it gives you that extra bit of confidence and confirmation to know what to trade and in which direction to trade it. Simply, to put it very simply, seasonality gives you an extra edge, which is always good. So now that you've seen how useful this can be, let's get into more specifics. Why does seasonality even happen? What's the logic behind it? Well, the simplest way and the best way to explain this is by using commodities as an example. And the most logical ones. There's natural cycles at play that drives supply and demand of the commodity, seasonal trends related to weather patterns, temperature patterns, demand and supply patterns, and so on. Makes sense, right? So seasonality is a combination of natural cycles, human behavior, and economic patterns. Like, for instance, think about retail sales, for instance, okay? They boom during the holidays, which lead to stronger economic data, higher stock earnings, and as a result, it lifts equity prices, creating seasonal flows through the year, like the famous November and December rallies in stocks. Now, Agriculture, as mentioned, has its harvesting times during the year, creating patterns of supply and demand, weather patterns and all that. Or for instance, also think of big funds, big companies. They also follow annual patterns. They might sell losing position in December for tax purposes or adjust their portfolios. They might convert specific currencies into other currencies at a specific time of the year, maybe at the end of the quarter, whatever. But those create seasonal patterns that repeat every year around those periods. And on top of that, also think about the fact that seasonality is nothing new. Hedge funds, portfolio managers, investors, traders, they're all aware of it. If you trade professionally, you're aware of it. And so that tends to help, the seasonal pattern actually take place, because as people, tend to position in that direction up in the trend flow. And honestly, that's the whole point. That seasonality, it's a real thing in the market that you can use to your advantage. Because when you understand the natural rhythm of the markets, you add that extra layer of information that is based on decades of data showing how the market behaves during that specific time of the year. It's not bulletproof, obviously. Nothing is bulletproof in trading. But without a doubt, paying attention to these flows gives you an extra edge that's always useful. Now, where can you find seasonal data? So personally, we have a proprietary tool available to the private network members that allows us to generate up-to-date seasonal charts for all asset classes and currencies. On top of that, we also have a more in-depth tool that takes care, doing that year-by-year type of seasonal analysis in just a couple of clicks to allow us to confirm the seasonal pattern, to know really that there is something there that repeats year after year. But again, seasonality is nothing new. Nothing new, nothing secret. So there's plenty of websites, plenty of tools, plenty of data there available. And also, for instance, you can follow us on X. We post some of those charts, some of those insights. When we see something seasonally interesting, we kind of post it there. So you can follow us on X as well. Now, the point is that you have many options to stay up to date on the seasonal flows. Just find your favorite and start using it to improve your trading.